Hi, welcome to the How Do I video series on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. My name is Mark Brummel and I'm an MVP for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. I will be presenting how do I implement overview information on subpages in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. This video is made in collaboration with Plataan, a Microsoft Dynamics Learning Center from Belgium, and Microsoft. At the end of this video you will have a better understanding of how to implement overview information on subpages and when to implement it in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. The objective of this video is to first look at design patterns as a concept. We will also introduce entry patterns. After that we will look at overview information on subpages as a pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. Design patterns are common solutions or best practices to solve problems. This is a well-known concept in computer programming and can therefore be applied to Dynamics NAV as well. This video is part of a series around design patterns in Dynamics NAV, and during this video I will reference to other patterns and videos. In this video we will also introduce anti-patterns. Where design patterns are best practices, anti-patterns are ineffective and have a chance of being counterproductive. Anti-patterns can be solutions to solve problems that once were design patterns and now have become obsolete because of new insights and progression in software development. Anti-patterns can also be design patterns in other scenarios. The anti-pattern for overview information is statistics. In this video we will be going through 3 easy steps. In step 1, meet a pattern, we will look at simplified UI, the goals of this pattern and the alternatives. In step 2, know the pattern, we will look at the steps to implement overview information on subpages. And in step 3 we will look at an example of the pattern in Dynamics NAV 2015. The simplified UI was first introduced in Dynamics NAV 2013 R2. The goal is to make the product more intuitive to use for smaller companies. To accomplish this, a number of new design patterns were introduced, of which overview information on subpages is one. Traditionally we are used to show statistics pages with totals in Dynamics NAV. There are 2 advantages of doing this. The first is performance. We only have to calculate totals when the user specifically asks for it. The second advantage would be to have a specific point to calculate sales discounts, as they span across multiple lines. We will be coming back to that later. The overview information on subpages pattern allows us to show the same information we have on a statistics page directly on the document. This saves the end user an extra action whenever they want to see totals or enter discount amounts. This pattern should only be used to show information that has real value during the entering of the document. Non-important information should stay on the statistics page. So let's have a look at the structure of the pattern. The pattern consists of 2 parts. The first part is the page design, the user interface. The second part is the AL code that does the calculation. An example of the user interface is page 47, the sales invoice subpage. Below the repeater that contains the columns, there is a group that contains 2 subgroups. The subgroups contain the 2 columns that show the data. The groups have no captions. They only exist to force the layout. The fields are displayed directly under the columns for the user. Please note that this layout will not work in Dynamics NAV 2013 R2. In this version there is a workaround which is implemented in page 1305. From an AL perspective, the biggest challenge is to trigger the calculation of the totals. We do not want to calculate them too often for a performance perspective, and when they are calculated they should be correct. The basics is done in the on-after-get record trigger. This calculates the totals in a specifically designed code unit. The trigger is activated when opening the page and when moving from line to line. Then there are a number of page controls that trigger a function to update the totals. First it calls the cur page save record, and then it calls a function in the same document total code unit that also calculates the discount if required. To test if recalculating the discount is required, a mechanism is implemented in the sales line table, which is triggered in a number of events. We will come back to this later. And last but not least, in the function that calculates the discount, the fail-safe methodology is being reset. Let's see how this works in Dynamics NAV 2015. If we open a sales order in Microsoft Dynamics NAV, we can see that there are 3 sales lines and the total is being displayed in the bottom. 2 of the 3 sales lines have a line discount percentage. Let's add an invoice discount amount. And if we do that, we can see that the system recalculates the discount, the totals runtime. Let's add a sales line and see what the system does. We will type in an item number, enter the quantity, and the system warns that it resets the invoice discount. The invoice discount is blanked out and the totals are updated. If we now re-enter the sales invoice discount and we delete one of the sales lines, the system grays out the totals and warns us that the totals may not be up to date and we have to tap this link in order to update the totals again. This is the fail-safe mechanism that is being triggered if the system cannot update the totals. Let's have a look at the AL structure, and we'll start with the variables being used on the page. There are 4 variables: a buffer table called total sales line, a function called salesCalcDisc dot get cost invoice discount percentage, a decimal called VAT amount, and the refresh message text. Knowing that, our next stop is to on off the get cur record trigger. In this trigger, a code unit, document totals, is called to update the total controls with the variables we have just seen being used in the page. But before we go into the definition of this function, let's first look at the fields that trigger the recalculation. There were 9 fields that, after populating a value, the system will call a function in the document totals code unit. Whenever the value changes, the same function is being called, saving the record to the database and calling a function in the document totals called sales redistribute invoice discount amounts. Note that before doing that, the system checks if a maximum number of sales line limit is reached. This maximum is hard-coded at 100 sales lines. The last trigger to understand before going into the document totals code unit is a new field called recalculate invoice discount, which is added to the sales line table. This new field indicates the system that something was changed that requires recalculation of the sales invoice discount. It is triggered from 4 places in the application. validating the type and the number field, the function update amounts, and very important, the onDelete trigger. In the onDelete trigger of the table, at the end of the trigger, a new code was added that whenever a sales line is deleted, the system randomly assigns the recalculate invoice discount to another sales line. This makes sure that the invoice discount is recalculated if a sales line is deleted. With this knowledge, let's go back to the document totals code unit. With this knowledge, let's go back to the code unit document totals and look at the functions sales update total controls and sales redistribute invoice discount amounts. The function sales update total controls does a few tests. First, it checks if a recalculation is required. Using the recalculate invoice discount field. If this is not the case, the system updates the totals in the sales update totals function. The invoice discount field is set editable depending on a test if the invoice discount is allowed in the setup. Next, it checks if the fields should be grayed out or not, and if the totals are not accurate because of a refresh required, the amounts are set to 0 because there is a chance that they are wrong. The function sales redistribute invoice discount amounts is called from the onValidate of the 9 fields in the sales line page. It checks if one of the sales lines are marked for recalculation. And if so, the code unit for sales discount is executed. In this code unit, after the calculation is done, a function reset calculate invoice discount is executed, and in this function all recalculation indicators are being reset. So we've gone through the CAL structure from the onAfterGet record, where the sales update total controls is being called, through the 9 fields where, depending on the indicator, the sales line discount is being recalculated. We discussed the fields that trigger the recalculation in the sales line, and lastly we looked at the functions in the document total code unit and the sales line calculate discount. This remains 2 pieces that we have not discussed yet. The sales line calc discount by type get customer invoice discount percentage and the refresh message text. The get cost invoice discount percentage function calculates the total amount of the sales line and calculates the total discount amount and returns the total discount percentage, which will help salespeople determining the total discount amount that has been applied to a certain sales document. The refresh message text is populated from the document total code unit with either a blank value or a text constant, and if it's required, it is toggled to be visible and displayed to the user, indicating to press to recalculate the sales invoice discount. This is done using the onDrillDown trigger, which calls the same function we saw earlier in the validation of the 9 fields in this very page. In this video we have learned how to implement the overview information on subpages pattern in Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015. We looked at the page design and we discussed all the AL functions required to implement this pattern. Thanks for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in another episode of the How Do I video series for design patterns on Microsoft Dynamics NAV 2015.